I'm Suzanne Murdock, and welcome to Series 2 of Powering Productivity. Each episode, I explore the energy that connections, expertise, and being in your best flexible working environment can bring to not just your business, but to your whole life. So let's get started. Welcome, I'm your host, Suzanne Murdock, and today I'm joined by Emily Crosby of Emily Crosby Media. Now, between you and me, Emily is an absolute superstar at all things podcasting, producing, and editing, and has a really interesting story in media broadcasting. She also has an obsession with BBC Radio 4, modern history, and I've just found out about organisation as well. And I'll let you into a secret. I have obsessions with all of those things too. Emily's message is she really wants to put the media that you create to good use, to get your message out there and to help make you money. I can't wait to talk about all the different elements and ways to broadcast media, Emily, and how this can really impact your business and how it can help save your time and energy if we go about it in a really smart way. So welcome, and how are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm good, thanks. That was a lovely introduction.
Thank you. I'd really love to hear a bit about your story today. You have a really interesting journey that you've been telling me all about before. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So yes, I have had a slightly roundabout route to what I do, and I suppose the thread that runs through all of it is a sort of understanding, problem solving, sort of inquisitive nature, I think, and the organisation element comes from what I found. So I read history at university, but I specialised in two sort of parallel strands. I did a lot of philosophy of political thought, but I also did 20th century film, specialising in turn of the century Russian film, which is very specific and unusual. But once I finished university, I worked for a couple of academic institutions, and I co-wrote a book about cine magazines, which were like the colour supplement to the newsreels in the 20s and 30s. And then worked for the BBC for a couple of years in their commercial wing, doing research into shots for companies that were making other programmes. So if you were making a programme about the British coastline, I would find shots from the BBC archive that you could buy to add into your programme. And then I had children, and like so many people, had to slightly rethink what I was doing. And a couple of my friends had podcasts, and I've always been interested in radio. I had a radio show at university, and a couple of friends said, could you help me out? Because I need some help organising my podcast, or I need some help with some research, that kind of thing. And it just started as a bit of a way to use my brain when I was at home with the kids, really. And that's grown until now I produce or edit roughly, I think I've got 6 or 7 podcasts on the go at the moment. But I also provide people help with video, with online courses, with anything kind of media-y, really. And my aim is to help people, if you're producing audio or video, to reuse it, to make the best use of it, to make it the most accessible. So it's actually making money for your business rather than just kind of being a hobby or a thing you feel you have to do because everybody else is doing it.
Wow, fascinating. So tell me this, when did podcasts really start becoming mainstream? Because I can remember, say, 5 years ago, the whole podcasting, oh my God, that person's got a podcast, that's amazing. But now it really does seem to be more mainstream.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I personally have been listening to podcasts since, I was trying to work this out yesterday. I think I've been listening to them since 2005. So when I worked for the BBC, I had a cataloguing job for some of the time. I'd be watching silent shots from the natural history unit, and I'd have to catalogue them, which doesn't use the audio part of your brain at all. So I used to listen to podcasts at the same time, but they were very rare and very niche, and they weren't as commercial as they are now. There weren't these big companies making them, and there weren't business podcasts. It was kind of random people with a hobby that they wanted to talk about and basically have their own radio show. So yeah, I think
that's what I was going to ask is who would have had them? Would it be, say, academics, researchers, people with a big niche within their career?
Yeah, and I think it was much more niche. There were a few. So I have friends who were really in at the beginning, the sort of early adopters of podcasts who were making sort of entertainment ones. But it was rare. And often it was an outlet for people who wanted to work in radio, wanted to work in speech radio, but couldn't break the way in. So they'd make their own, essentially. I think probably you're right. In about the past 5 years, businesses have started to notice how popular they are. Series like Serial and those kind of, massive entertainment series really made people realize that it was a medium they could get on board with. And I think the pandemic has also really increased people's online presence in all formats. Actually, I've had lots more inquiries about video and podcasts because people want to be findable online in an approachable way.
I think as well, people have gained that bit more confidence in front of the camera and the microphone because that's the only medium they've had to communicate with.
Yeah.
Would you say, I mean, obviously the pandemic has been a springboard, if you like, in terms of podcasts and media growth. Would you say it's a real must now to have a podcast in your business? What sort of sectors would really benefit from this if they haven't already got one?
I don't think you have to, but I think if you're interested if the goals that you have for your business align with podcasting as a format, I think it can be a really useful tool. I think there are less direct benefits than some other forms of media. So if you have a Google ad out about your business, you can track exactly how many clients you get from that ad. Podcasting isn't quite so direct. But if your goal for your business is to, for example, position yourself as an expert in your field, a podcast can be a great way of doing that. If your goal is to just make yourself more approachable and have a shortcut to that getting to know you stage before a client buys in, a podcast can be perfect for that too. So I think it's slightly less, some of the benefits are slightly less tangible, but it can be really good for, especially if your business is quite personality driven. It's a great way to let people into your personality.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I mean, how would you stand out? How do you make your podcast that bit different from somebody else's? Because there are so many out there now.
There really are. And you're absolutely right. There are millions of podcasts. I think one of the key things is getting your strategy right. So really honing in on what the purpose, what the goals of your podcast are, and being clear with your audience what you're putting out. Because I think a lot of people start off from the wrong angle. I need to have a podcast. What should it be about? Whereas if you have some information you want to put out there and a podcast suits it as a format, that is the correct direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it really complements other forms of media that you're using in your business as well. And, a lot of people would have a lot of connections, a lot of experts in their circles that complement what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really good platform to use to get that, the advocacy and the educational side of things out as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you're in an area that is changing fast, if there's a lot of growth in your industry, or if there's a lot of discussion about what makes your industry. I've worked with a couple of clients who are in industries that are only just professionalizing, or who are really going through a difficult process of understanding what it means to be what they do. If you're in that kind of environment, having a podcast where you're talking to people within your field about what you do and why and how can really draw in other people from your industry in a really great way. It's almost like having a conference, but every time you have your episode, right? And that's so accessible for everybody. And it makes it a much, it does position you as an expert, but it also positions you as the kind of person who's interested in what you're doing. So it's reputation building as well.
Yeah, which brings me on to the next question. I mean, making media more accessible. Why is this so important in terms of, I guess, different platforms of taking on board information? So you've got your transcripts, you've got audio, visual. Why is that all so important now?
So there's two sort of motivations for accessibility in audio particularly. One is just accessibility, right? There are people who can't access your information if you're just putting it out in audio. So having good transcripts and providing them on your website is key for people who can't just listen because of disability or because of time or because of whatever motivation they have. The second reason for doing transcripts particularly is just that they're great for SEO. I mean, it's an added benefit that Google can crawl all of that when people are searching and find keywords within your transcripts. But with all of that stuff, with video as well, providing captions, making sure that your media is accessible just means that you're going for the biggest audience possible. You're not sort of only targeting half the people because you've not bothered to level up your accessibility.
Do you know, for me, I scroll down Instagram in the evening when I'm sitting on the sofa, and I can see someone's face, and I really want to listen to what they're saying, but sometimes you just don't want that noise. So if you've got those captions, they're absolutely brilliant. So I think it also comes down to the mood you're in and the brain space you have left and the energy you have left.
Absolutely. I have to say, it's partly where your audience are, right? A lot of young people consume a lot of their information via video, right? They'll go on YouTube and they'll find, my children constantly, they'll come up with some fact at dinner and I'll say, where did you get that from? And so, I was watching a video about it.
They live on YouTube.
Absolutely. And they love
TV.
No, and they love to consume information like that. Personally, I'm much more of a reader. If a video has subtitles, I will read the titles quite happily. I don't want to listen. I spend all day listening to things. So I will read it much quicker than they can say it and sort of skim read it and still take in the information. So if you've got titles, you've got a transcript, you're appealing to somebody like me as well, or a nursing mother who doesn't want to wake a child, or somebody who's on the train but has forgotten their headphones, even as simple as that, right?
I've also found out a knack of hogging the TV and making sure everyone else vacates the room, is you put on a film in some different language and you put on the subtitles. Because my preference would be Russian.
That's brilliant. I like it. I mean, I find it's because I'm old. I find increasingly I have subtitles for TV generally, especially some Netflix productions have such high background music that I need subtitles just to make sure I can follow the dialogue. I think it's that's what comes with old age.
But it's interesting you said about SEO. If you've got the transcript there, does that include captions on your videos, or do you mean if you've got the transcripts and you put them within, say, a blog on your website?
That's a good question. I suspect that captions probably are searchable now, but don't hold me to that. But transcripts certainly are. If they're not, well, even if they are on your website as a downloadable PDF, they will be searchable, but they're much more easily accessible if they are presented a bit like a blog or something. You know, the whole text is on the page for your episode. And that really does help with SEO. But also, if you've generated that transcript, it's a great way of reusing the material. You've got the words there that you can reuse, right? So you can pull quotes out to share on social media, all of that good stuff, making a blog post out of it. Yeah. It's readily available there for you.
Yeah. Which nicely brings me on to the next section there. So you're really big into using generics in podcasting, videos, and editing to save your time and energy, but really repurposing, which is what we've been talking about lately as well. Tell me about what that really entails. How do you go about that? What does it mean?
So there's two things there. The generics idea is really about saving you time. If you're creating a podcast, and especially if you're a micro business, if it's just you or you're a small team, you don't want to be reinventing the wheel every time you're making your episodes. So having a standard intro, outro, having your musical set, having even set calls to action. So if you want people to subscribe to your podcast, or you've got an offer that you're doing, recording something of a really good quality that you can put in all the next 6 episodes or something like that just saves you time and energy, but it also makes your podcast sound professional. If you have those beginning and endings.
I have to laugh after what you told me to do yesterday. Can I share that?
You can absolutely.
Share the secret sitting under the duvet in between 2 chairs back to back. My child had a great laugh at that one.
As I typed it to Suzanne, I said, This is going to feel very silly, but this is the best. I mean, I know professional. So a couple of my friends are professional podcasters. That's what they do for a living, and they travel a lot. And they have recorded in some very odd situations, putting the microphone in a washing machine and then putting a blanket over their head. All of those sort of sound treatments feel ridiculous, but getting a really lovely sound for those beginning and endings. What we're aiming for as a base level is for your sound not to sound annoying, right? You want people to start listening and not be put off by the sound, essentially. So having a really nice, crisp intro and it feeling as professional as the brand for your business feels is really key. And so having those set as generics really helps. But with the repurposing, I mean, I started off helping people create media without thinking too much about repurposing. But then it occurred to me that once they created that piece, if they'd done a live video on stories or they'd recorded an episode of a podcast, they were putting it out once, they were storing it on a hard drive and forgetting about it. And there's money there for you that you're not using for your business. And you wouldn't do that with another product, right? You wouldn't write a book, have it published, and then put it on your shelf and leave it there, right? And it's the same thing. What you need to be doing is thinking, how else can I use this material? Because I want to draw in the audience that already exist. I want to remind people who haven't listened to it or watched it already that it still exists. But I also, in creating a series of videos on YouTube or a podcast series, you've created a body of work that people can access at any time, right? It's going to be on the internet for as long as it's on the internet. 50% of podcast listens are to episodes that weren't published in the last month. Yeah. So if you've repurposed bits of your podcast and made some little videos or put some quotes out a month later and told people, don't forget, I talked about this thing, or my latest episode is about this subject. We touched on it in episode 3. And here's a link to it. If you're doing that, you're constantly churning that information back for people who might be a new audience or might be your existing audience who've forgotten about it. And it's all just part of really making the best use of the time and energy you put in the first place.
Yeah, brilliant. And I guess you can also take snippets or mention previous podcasts in new podcast conversations that you're having as well, or put the link within a blog on a certain subject that you're talking about. Absolutely. I've done podcasts from around February last year, and I've been putting them into blog posts and referring back to them. So it's been really useful. But you do forget the content that you have unless you categorize it and log it correctly, which comes back to your organizational skills. Absolutely.
I think as you create more and more media, there's always a point where, and this is true for enormous organizations and single one-man band, you always get to a point where you think, I don't have the storage for this and I can't remember what's on these things. And in an ideal world, we would all start off with fantastic metadata. So we would always have who was recording, what they were talking about, and when it was saved with the file. But let's be honest, nobody does that. I don't do that, and I do this for a job. But at some point, I think, and literally I've just been having a conversation with a client before this, at some point you have to get to the point where you're like, if I want to reuse what I've made, I need to know what's there, and it needs to be really easily searchable. So yeah, I do work with people often to build some kind of structure for them, some kind of catalogue. So you've got a working library. It's the equivalent of having a library with a great catalogue that you can search online, or a room full of boxes of old dusty books.
Good analogy. So Emily, if you're really new to this whole podcasting thing and you're desperate to get started, but you're hesitant at the same time and you're lacking that confidence, what tips would you have to start people off?
So I've got 2 tips that run sort of alongside each other. Firstly, get listening. So listen to loads of other podcasts in all sorts of genres. You don't have to just listen to business podcasts if you want to make a business podcast, but just start to get a feel for what you like to listen to, what you feel like your existing audience will want to listen to, or the kind of customers you're trying to build up. And maybe write yourself a sort of list of what aspects you like and what you feel comfortable that you could produce. So you might really enjoy a podcast where people talk in a dialogue together like this. Or you might actually really like a scripted podcast where one person is giving over their expertise. Like, have a think about those kind of format things to start with. And my second tip would be to get talking, even if you're just doing some Instagram stories, right? Just to get used to, it's not quite performing, but, speaking to more than one person at a time. Start. The more you do that, the more you talk to your audience, the easier that will flow. And then when you're behind the microphone, it won't feel awkward and you won't be stuttering for something to say. As you can tell, that's not a problem I have, but but a lot of people.
The other thing might be, pick a subject that you're really excited about and has a lot of different perspectives and angles that you could tap into.
Absolutely. A lot of people struggle at the sixth episode, right? So the first handful you've got the momentum, you had some ideas to start with, but if you've picked a subject that doesn't have enough longevity or doesn't have enough breadth, at episode 6, people are like, oh, I've run out of the friends and colleagues I was going to talk to. And that it's that's known in the podcast world as that's the point where it becomes tricky. So choosing your subject wisely, but also trying to expand out from that subject is really key.
Yeah, and I think finding themes through the year and planning ahead. I found that's really helpful.
I'm going to sneeze, excuse me.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries at all. So what sort of equipment would you need to start out if you've got a low budget and you're right at the start of this?
So this is a question I get asked a lot because I think there are so many options out there that people really struggle with choosing equipment. But I always like to say that you don't have to spend an awful lot of money. At a basic level, you need a microphone that you connects via USB so that you can plug it straight into your computer. As you can see, I've also got, if you're watching the video, I've also got a pop shield, which really helps to cut down on the air hitting the microphone when you speak. That can be useful to have. They're only about £10. You also need a good pair of headphones because you want to be listening to what you're recording and not the sound in the room. Apart from that, I think that's the basics. You'll also obviously need some editing software and a host for your podcast, but I don't think you need to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on equipment. My microphone is made by Audio-Technica. They come in around £100. They're not vastly expensive. I think you've got a Blue Yeti. Again, they're not vastly expensive either. No. And you can also get really good deals secondhand because a lot of people would have started off with a basic mic and then upgraded and sold them on the likes of eBay or Facebook Marketplace or somewhere like that. And you can get some great reconditioned ones too. So don't let the sort of technology be a barrier to starting. You can definitely pick up some bargains.
And I think the other thing that would hold a lot of people back is the editing afterwards. I know I did a bit of training. We had some help with our local college here. A guy was really, really helpful. But it got to the stage where I kind of knew what I was doing, but I knew it was going to take a lot of time. And I think if you weigh up the time and the cost of your time, it's often a lot more reasonable to use experts like yourself who can do the post-editing and then repurpose a lot of the content as well.
Yeah. I think often clients come to me after their first few episodes or their first series, if they're a series, because while they can do it, it's the amount of time it takes. And editing is a time-consuming process because essentially you have to have listened through to the whole thing a number of times, right? Everybody takes a set amount of time, but also if you're a professional like me, you're doing it all the time. So you know all the shortcuts. You also get a feel for the voices involved. And so you might have some presets that you've created for that particular project to cut some of the background sound or those kind of things. So we can reduce the amount of time if it's something you enjoy doing, go for it. You can totally do it yourself. But if you feel like it's a chore and it's stopping you from putting your podcast out, or it's taking you longer and longer, or frankly, you earn more than you're going to have to pay someone, outsource it, just like anything else.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll just give a plug to our local college here, who we did do the project with, and were fantastic helping me get this set up, and training Kieran Swell of Southern Regional College here. But I think similarly in other locations, there's going to be colleges that you can work with and do projects there, and work in partnership, if that's something that you're looking to do.
Absolutely. And there'll be students out there who really want to get the experience of editing too. People starting out in the industry really need a portfolio of work. So there's often opportunities to get some people on board, get a technical team for yourself by helping some students out with some work experience too.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, where do you find that you're most productive? What's your most productive working environment? You've recently joined a flexible workspace yourself, haven't you?
I have, yeah. So I work in Dragon Co-working in Kent. And I've actually found it has really transformed my business. So I worked at home for years before the pandemic, when there was nobody else in my home. and I had the silence to be able to edit. But I found whilst everybody was at home and the kids were homeschooling too, it really wasn't sustainable. And now my husband is still at home working. So I now have an office to myself, and I have the perfect mix, actually. I'm in a little box of my own where I can shut the door and edit quietly. But I can also have the door open and have the chatter and feel like there's people around. And we also have, and I'm sure this is common for flex working and co-working spaces, we have networking events, we have social events and things, and also just the opportunity to have sort of colleagues at lunchtime. It's the perfect mix of colleagues without any of the office politics. It's people to chat to and bounce some ideas off, or occasionally make a connection with for some actual work. But also, I'm not beholden to any of them. So if I don't want to speak to people, I also don't have to. It's perfect for me.
Yeah, no, I think your day is your own. You can speak to who you want to, when you want to, unless they're working. But I think it gives you a lot of confidence and creativity as well. I know when I'm doing certain projects, I'm better working at home, but then others where I need a bit of inspiration, creativity and energy, I will certainly come into the office and speak to members. That really helps boost my energy.
Yeah. And there's something about, and I think this is what a lot of people have missed during the lockdowns as well. There's something about the spontaneity of bumping into somebody in the corridor and saying, "Oh, you do this thing, right? Can I just pick your brain about something?" Or "I'm thinking about this. Would that work?" That it feels much more formal to email a person, or, go into their DMs and say, I'm Emily and blah, blah, blah. Whereas if they're just in the building and you walk past them and say, you do animation, right? I've been thinking about something. That kind of those kind of casual interactions are really helpful, just for your own creativity, but also for making business connections that I don't think I would have done otherwise.
Yeah, and if they don't know someone, they'll know someone who'll know someone.
Right, exactly.
So it's a win-win, really.
Yeah.
So where next for Emily?
Well, so I've been working with an associate of mine who does some editing for me on some new resources. So we're really going to be focusing this year on strategy for all of your media. So thinking much more about what the goals are for your project before you start, and coming back to those goals throughout the project so that you know whether you're actually hitting the marks or not. We've got a podcast audit for people who are in an established podcast and want to know how they can sort of level up. But I'll also be doing those same kind of strategy, goal setting ideas for video and for online courses too, so that you can really focus on making sure that it is a profitable product as well as a successful media production.
Fantastic. So where can people find out more about you, Emily?
I've got a website, emilycrosbymedia.com, nice and easy. There's loads of free articles there about starting your podcast if you want more information, and links to microphones and that kind of stuff. I'm also on Instagram as Emily Crosby Media too, where you'll find me chatting a bit about what work I've got going on and also some tips.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I've loved listening to all about your stories and your expertise, and I love the different platforms and way that we can all share our stories going forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget that all the episodes and links are on our website, thehubnewry.com. While you're there, you can stay tuned with what we're up to by subscribing to our mailing list. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and thanks again for being here. Powering Productivity is presented by me, Suzanne Murdock, and produced by Emily Crosby Media.